January 1st, 1863. African American slaves were declared free from slavery thanks to Abraham Lincoln and his Emancipation Proclamation. However, that didn't give us the rights that black people have now. We went through a point in time where we had white and colored bathrooms and water fountains, black and white schools, and black people had to sit at the back of buses. This happened in an era we call the Segregation era. In this era, black people were tired of being treated unfairly and they wanted to have equal rights. They knew change was needed, so they protested. They used protests as a way of communication to tell everyone that black people mattered too. There were many famous segregation protests in history, so why don't we just run over them? One of the protests is Montgomery Bus boycott. This started when 42-year-old black woman Rosa Parks got arrested for refusing to give up her seat because she was at the front of the bus when she was supposed to be in the back. This made other African Americans protest by refusing to give up their seats. This was to protest bus seating and segregation and went on from December 5th, 1955 to December 20th, 1956. The year-long boycott led by Martin Luther King Jr. was the first large-scale demonstration against segregation in the United States. Also, while Rosa Parks was the reason this started, this isn't the first time this happened. 9 months before this, 15-year-old Claudette Colvin was arrested in Montgomery for the same reason Rosa Parks was. Black leaders were about to protest, but they found out that Colvin was pregnant and thought that this was inappropriate and didn't protest it. From this boycott, African Americans are allowed to sit anywhere they want to on a bus. And Rosa Parks, she was bailed by E.D. Nixon, a black leader, so she was fine. With the civil rights movement going strong, Martin Luther King developed a peaceful way to protest on February 1st, 1960. 4 African American students, Ezell Blair Jr., David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil were at a whites-only lunch counter and waited for service after refusal. This is how SitIns got started. SitIns were just sitting down and waiting for service, and you couldn't participate unless your purpose for participating was serious. Sometimes this peaceful protest became less and less peaceful. Angry white people often picked fights with the students. Students would curl up in a ball position and take the beating until the police came and arrested them. Before the school year ended for the black college students, 1,500 black students were taken to jail, but it wasn't for nothing. Restaurants in the South were abandoning the policies of segregation. The sit-ins were worth it. Another form of peaceful protesting made by Martin Luther King Jr. was the Selma March. Just like the peaceful protests you've seen now, African Americans had walked 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery. This protest, with 25,000 participants, lasted for 4 days. The event of the Selma March led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Of course, when there's peace, it can be disturbed. Sometimes during the march, the protesters would be stopped by white people. One of the stops were really violent. One Sunday, March 7th, also known as Bloody Sunday, led by John Lewis, African Americans were interrupted by deputies, police on horses, and dozens of troopers. After refusing to talk to one of the marchers, one of the police gave orders to thrash the protesters. Marchers were ran over by horses, tear gassed, and hit with clubs and whips. More than 50 people, even John Lewis himself, had to go to the hospital. The worst part, the whole thing was televised. A group of 9 African American students attended an all-white school by the name of Central High School in September 1957. Does this story sound familiar? It should, because this is the start of the Little Rock Nine. The governor, Orval Faubus, tried to stop the students from going into the high school. Later on, the president at the time, Dwight D. Eisenhower, sent in troops to escort the Little Rock Nine into Central High. The Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, made in May 17, 1954, made the decision that segregation was not allowed in public schools. However, resistance made the court have another decision in 1955, saying school districts had to integrate with all deliberate speed. Integration started happening in September 1957. Fortunately, the Little Rock Nine lived a good rest of their lives living successfully. With help of all the black leaders and their hard work, African Americans now have equal rights and are treated fairly. Because of the hard work, the Civil Rights Act of 1968 was created. Although we are in a battle that seems like it will last forever, we can at least look back at the protests that African Americans had to do to get the equal rights they deserve. We may need some motivation.